Hey, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Now, I've been doing a few Christmas movie reviews this season. I did one on Gremlins. I did another one on the 1987 horror classic Jack Frost. Mind you, not the one with Michael Keaton. This one is the one with a giant mutant killer snowman in it. But today we are going to talk about another Christmas movie, and that is the 1968 historical drama, The Lion in Winter. This is about a dysfunctional family during the Middle Ages that come together at Christmas. And hopefully your family is not as dysfunctional as these guys, because this is a pretty intense film, and there's a lot of political and personal problems going on between this family. The story here takes place in 1183, and of course everything that happens within this film is historically accurate down to the dialogue. And of course it really isn't. They take creative license with what you see here, but in order to make it more interesting. But a lot of what you do see, and a lot of the characters in the story and kind of their relationships with the other characters, is based on historic documentation. This is a Kino Lorber release, and this is the second time it's been released by Kino Lorber. But this one does kind of, it says it's newly restored in 4K. It is a Blu-ray, but it does say it's a restoration in 4K. The restoration was done by Studio Canal, and we'll talk a little bit about it later. I'm not going to go into great detail about the restoration or anything like that, but I will say the first time I saw this film, I had it on VHS, and I popped this particular VHS tape into the player, not in this location, in another location, but I popped it into a VCR, and I watched it on this VCR tape. And I can tell you from seeing that and this, there is a dramatic improvement in the quality from the time I saw it on VHS. Not to say that this VHS isn't a good copy of it, because it actually, when I saw it before on a smaller TV, it was fairly sufficient, and I didn't have any particular problems with the transfer at the time. Now, if I watch this, I would be like, wow, that thing looks like a really low quality movie. I don't know if the movie's not going to look low quality, but the transfer of the film might look low quality. The film stars Peter O'Toole as King Henry II and Katharine Hepburn as Eleanor of the Aquitaine. But there's a very, very strained relationship between the two characters. Now, there's a lot of history that takes place before this film. If you look back in the history pages, there's a lot of stuff that happened between these two characters before this movie. Well, they're actually based on real people, but before this movie begins, a lot happens. Now, Henry II has his queen, Eleanor, imprisoned in a castle keep. Now, in history, this castle keep has moved around to different places, so people couldn't figure out where she was being kept prisoner. But not said within the film for dramatic purposes. She did betray him several times before this, with going against him on different political matters, usually using his sons against him. So there's a reason why he has her imprisoned. In this film, it seems like he has her imprisoned just because she can't bear any more children. She's too old for that. It's kind of implied within the film here that that's what's going on, and that the character Eleanor, played by Katharine Hepburn, is still in love with him, but he's kind of trying to find new women. He's got a 23-year-old mistress who is King Philip. King Philip is a character in the film played by Timothy Dalton, but he's a new king, and he's fairly young in this film. But his sister is Henry's mistress. She's about 23 years old. His character is supposed to be 50, around 50, and Eleanor's character is supposed to be around 61. Now, Peter O'Toole, at the time of filming this, he was around 35 years old, so he was a good almost 25 years younger than Katharine Hepburn. Now, when the first time I watched it in this SD version of it, I didn't think that much about the age difference. Now, obviously, they have Peter O'Toole playing an older character, and it's fairly convincing, and I never really thought there was an age difference. Now, seeing it this time in 4K, I did see a significant age difference. Not that it necessarily matters, because it's okay for, especially in, Eleanor of Aquitaine was a very powerful woman, so it made sense even if he was younger than her for him to marry her, so he could obtain the Aquitaine land. That was a very large amount of land that is located in France. So it was a very big political move to marry her. So basically, you got a lot of tension. Now he keeps her in prison. Now on this particular day, here it is, it's Christmas. Now do note they have a Christmas tree, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Christmas tree here in a bit. But it is Christmas, so he's wanting to bring the family together, not necessarily for Christmas. There's some political stuff going on. He wants to name a successor. He's the king, but he wants to name a successor, and his youngest son is his preference. Now he's been coddling his younger son and trying to get him ready to be king. In this film, he's played by Nigel Terry, right? Prince John, and he's fairly young in the film. They say he's a teenager, and he acts, the way Nigel Terry plays him, the way he's written in this particular story, he acts like a real fool, and he's very young, but he's very like wanting that power, and he acts like a little kid about it, like a sniveling little brat for the most part. Now, something I should point out, and it kind of connects to this, and it'll bring a better time frame of this story into most people's minds. Now, the story of Robin Hood takes place after this. Like most of the time in Robin Hood, the King John is the king at the time, and he was a very horrible king, but he was the king at the time. Now the king before him was Richard the Lionheart, King John's brother. But in most Robin Hood stories, King John is the villain, and he's a horrible king, and Robin Hood's up against him. And as you know, Robin Hood was the guy who would steal from the rich and give to the poor. So it was kind of that's how bad of a king he was, that you needed like a hero to come in there and try to save things. And really, King John collapsed the dynasty that Henry had set up here. Now, King Richard here, well, he's Prince in the film. He's played by Anthony Hopkins. And so you got these three sons, and the other son's Prince Geoffrey, played by John Castle. And so you got three sons that are competing to be king next. Now, the middle one, King Geoffrey, was never really a contender. He wants to be chancellor for whoever the king is. Even though he secretly wants to be king, he thinks he might be trying to play like a house of cards thing here. King or Prince Geoffrey was a very, as seen in this film, he's a very scheming, kind of cold person, but he thinks that he should be king because he probably is, of the three, he's probably the most intelligent, but as it's treated, like both of his parents, neither one of them consider him a prospect to be the next king, even though he's in the middle and John's at the end. But both of them know him well enough to know that they're done with his bullshit. They're not gonna they don't want him to be king because they think he might be. I guess they're scared of what he might do as king. King Richard, on the other hand, was a big crusader. He was a big fighter. He was a very strong kind of leader. Of the three, he was probably the best candidate for the job, and he did become king first. But the problem was his mother, Eleanor, kind of like attached herself to him, and she was using him as a political leverage. So King Henry didn't like that. Because he was kind of basically, she was using Richard against him. And so in order to try to get out of feeling like someone was trying to overpower him, he went with the weaker son that he thought that maybe he could mold into something of himself. But as the film goes on, he starts to see that that's probably not going to work out too good. So it's a very intricate story about family and fighting, and really the stakes here are very high. I mean, wars are at stake. They also, like, Timothy Dalton plays Prince Philip, and then he comes to the party as well. I guess the gathering. He comes there as well, and he's there to negotiate some terms for France. He's the new king of France, and so Henry is trying to manipulate him, and Henry seems to be enjoying the interactions with him earlier on, because and he even compliments him. He says, "You're a lot better at this than I thought you were going to be." He thought he was going to come in there and run all over him, but he doesn't care. He actually enjoys the back and forth and the political stuff. But now Henry here, played by Peter O'Toole, and I should point out though actually that Katharine Hepburn as Eleanor won an Oscar for this film for her performance, and as you're seeing it, it's pretty clear to see why. That she's a powerhouse in this film. Very emotionally damaged character, and based on a historical figure that had a lot of power, but was taken out of that and put into and put into imprisonment, and she gets out. And the whole time she's out, she's constantly trying to scheme and manipulate everyone around her, and she's kind of gotten to the point where she's kind of becoming somewhat crazy from this captivity, and just the fact that she's out and just trying to manipulate anything she can. And it's fairly strong performance, very emotional. She does use her emotion as a weapon in several instances to try to trick her children, who have all kind of old enough to start to catch on to her ways. And so even though sometimes they start to become somewhat manipulated by her, and you never really know throughout the film her like if she really loves her kids, or I think she does, but at the same time she can't necessarily like show it in ways because she feels that she has to continue to use it as leverage to get her power back. But she does a terrific job in this film, and she deservedly won an Oscar. But not to discount Peter O'Toole's performance as Henry II. Now, he goes through a lot of complex emotions in this film. He himself is trying to scheme and manipulate every situation that he's in. He tries to set it up, and it's like he's playing a game of chess with the kids and his wife and Prince Philip and his mistress, Prince Philip's sister, and he's using them all as kind of leverage. And sometimes he gets overly emotional. And and while you're watching the film, it may take you a little bit further back when he shouts some lines occasionally. Like, it's like, why is he so like shouting? He shouts some of the dialogue so loud it almost distorts the audio, and it seems a little much sometimes. But that is a historical accurate thing that he's doing there. If you read about Henry II, that is something that he was prone to do. But he's also, the thing about this character, and he's supposed to be 50 years old, he's also very energetic, and he's not finished being a king. He actually really loves being a king. He loves playing these games, but he doesn't like to lose. And when he starts to lose, he gets very emotional and he lashes out. But there's definitely some parts near the end where he becomes very strong in his performance and very almost fearsome and even kind of scary in some instances. The character of the mistress, I think her name is Alais, or maybe Alais, played by Jane Marrow, is a interesting character too. As it starts out, she's a fairly young character, and she seems to just be really in love with Henry and kind of going along with whatever. She's just having a fun time. But she ultimately wants Henry, but not only that, she wants the power. Now, I don't think she realizes that she wants the power until further into the film. Briefly, she thinks she has power, and then you see, I think, her true character. But I do have a couple of things about that it seems that her character becomes somewhat, at one point near the end of the film, King Henry imprisons his 3 sons, and he tells her that he's going to try to get his relationship or his marriage to Eleanor annulled, and she's going to be his new queen. And she says to him that she wants him, she doesn't want him to. She tells him that if he's doing this, he's going to have to either imprison all 3 of his sons forever and never let them out, or he's going to have them killed, which seems a little stern. But 2 things about that. Maybe she's serious here, but I think maybe she's telling him that maybe she doesn't want this to happen. Maybe she fears what's going to happen past this, and whether it's going to destroy her relationship with Henry in a way that they're both going to regret it, or they could both be harmed or killed by like Prince Philip's retaliation or someone else's retaliation against these acts. So I think she kind of maybe likes this situation, the way it's set up a little bit. I mean, the queen is imprisoned and she can be with him, but the problem is, and the reason that she doesn't necessarily want to go forward with this is Henry II can't stay with her permanently, because she is, by a treaty thing, she is supposed to marry his next son, the son that comes into power. So after his death and the son that comes into power, she's supposed to marry that son in a treaty with France. So she can't permanently stay with him, and he's trying to, so he acts like he wants to put her with Prince John, but it may end up being Prince Richard if he ends up being next in power. But it's a fairly complex character. Really, all the characters here are very complex, and it's a very interesting dynamic throughout the film. They did do a remake of this, a made-for-television remake with Patrick Stewart and Glenn Close. And I didn't watch the remake, but I probably should take a look at it sometimes. I'm not sure how much it differs or how interesting it is compared to this one. Now, this one's going to be hard to beat. I mean, another cool thing about the film is they shot it in a real castle. Now, the castle in the film, as far as I can tell, is a castle which was Henry II's private residence that he got. The castle is now in France, but at the time, England owned this part of the land, and it was a Chateau de Chinon in France. I believe that's the castle that this film takes place in. But it's pretty cool that they weren't able to shoot in the real castle, but they did shoot in a real castle, and it all looks friggin' really, really medieval and pretty cool throughout the film. So a lot of scenery. Now, based on a stage play, it is kind of stagey somewhat. The dialogue here is very witty. It's very sharp. It's just some awesome lines in this. Sometimes you hear some of the lines and you're just like, yes, that was great. But at the same time, there's a lot of monologues, and some of it does sound like it's more of a play than a movie. But at the same time, they do have the good set, and they're able to add a few scenes here and there showing more of the outside of the castle and the middle of the castle and things of that nature. But for some, maybe turned off by the fact that it is based on a play, and it does kind of follow that play for the most part. Now let's talk about the Christmas tree. Yes, there's a Christmas tree in the film inside of the castle in the main room, and they have some big-ass ornaments on it, and they even at some point put some presents under it. Now, this really helps this be a Christmas film. Now, whether or not that is historically accurate, I don't think it was. I don't think Christmas trees were kind of at this point were that. They weren't there to where there's ornaments and presents. That's kind of something that happened in the 15th century. This is out in the 12th century. So I think it might have been a little early for that, but I'm really glad that they included that because it really kind of makes it feel like maybe it might be a Christmas film. And that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Is it a Christmas film, and is it one you need to add to your Christmas viewing list? Now I'm going to read. Yep, get ready for it. I'm reading something off of this thing. Now, and surprise, it's not off the 4K. It's off of this VHS tape. I got 3 things of trivia for you. Now the film, and I'm going to paraphrase these things, it marks the debut of Timothy Dalton, because he plays Prince Philip in it. It is the most celebrated film of the decade. The Lion and Winter was written by James Goldman and adapted from his Broadway play. And the third fact, production was halted and the completion of the film was threatened for 3 weeks when Anthony Hopkins was thrown from his horse, effectively breaking his arm. So that must have really sucked for Anthony Hopkins and production. They had to halt it for 3 weeks, but luckily they were able to get it. And Anthony Hopkins Anthony Hopkins really brings Richard to life in this film. I like his performance and his interactions, especially with Katharine Hepburn. I remember reading something about, or seeing something about an interview with him about how he was very intimidated acting with Katharine Hepburn, but it kind of helps the scene. Now, as this character is set up, he knows she's trying to manipulate him, and he's really worried about what's going to happen. Now, she's been in prison, and she's become more and more kind of crazy being in prison, but he's been off on crusades. And before this, he was very close to her as a kid, but he hasn't seen her in a long time. So it's kind of an awkward reunion for those characters, but he kind of starts to get back on board with her during the film. One thing with Anthony Hopkins' character that's revealed further on into the film, and this is kind of a spoiler, he's kind of had a Brokeback Mountain type of affair with Timothy Dalton's character, the Prince Philip. And now Prince Philip, in that scene when it's revealed, he doesn't act like he reciprocates the attention, but at the same time, it's not necessarily like he says that they had something going. Richard said that he loved him, but I think that it may not necessarily be that. It may just be that Richard wanted to overpower the character. It was a dominance thing. And then the same thing that Timothy Dalton's character says, that he participated only so he could later use it against Richard. 1968, when this came out, that was probably like a big reveal too. I know the first time I saw it, it was kind of like a big like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But now I think it's more that type of in films, that type of plot thing isn't nearly as shocking as it used to be. Now let's talk about the transfer here real quick. Now it does say it was made from a new 4K restoration of the film. This is a Blu-ray, not a 4K. but does look pretty good. I think if it was like a true 4K, it would look significantly better. I do see some grain throughout the film, and as it was shot on film, the grain needs to be there. It's not really too heavy, and in fact, sometimes now I think there might be some digital noise reduction here. I'm not sure because some parts of the film I don't see a lot of grain when you think there would be. Now sometimes in a scene you'll see some close-ups that seem a little soft focus, and maybe that's either the way that they are. I think there's some problems with the master of this film. You do see some problems in some areas. Maybe it was something that they couldn't fix, or they don't have the original film elements to fix it. But in general, though, I think the film isn't distracting. It isn't distracting the way that it looks. I think it looks fairly organic. It looks very pleasing to the eyes in general. So I would recommend it. This is the best transfer currently available. Now, if they were able to get hold of some better elements, some better film elements, even if this was upticked to 4K, it might look a little bit better, but it's not going to look too much better, as this is a 4K transfer to Blu-ray. Let's take a quick look at the packaging here. It's not much to see. It's just that's the front, that's the back. Inside is a Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray disc. That's only one disc in there. So let's go ahead and rate the film. I'm going to rate the film a 4-star rating. It does seem a little stagey or kind of overly monologued in some areas because it's based on a stage play, but I really enjoy the film. I think the acting is tremendous in this film. I'm going to give Kino Lorber a 3-star rating. Now, I guess the big question is, should you add this to your Christmas viewing list? I would say it's better than all of the Hallmark movies. I don't know. It is. I don't know. It depends on your tolerance for older films from 1968 and also films based on stage plays. And it is a little dark, but a lot of films are, and it doesn't necessarily have a Christmas type of feeling to it. It doesn't give you that jolly feeling. Now, this film to me seems timeless, especially with the family drama, and it's also interesting seeing the royal family power struggles throughout. Now, it is a very dysfunctional, extremely dysfunctional family, and hopefully no one else has got anything this bad going on, but really there's a lot at stake here, including who's going to be king next and possible wars with France and things of that nature. But I would recommend it, and I would maybe add it to your Christmas viewing list if you like this sort of thing. So if you would, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell thing. There's like a bell thing there. You hit that, you get like notifications the next time I post something. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.